Okay, there we go. And we've also got our AI note-taking friends in the chat. So I think we're all here, people and AI. And I'm just going to go ahead and kick us off today. All right, there we go. Folks, what I want to do, maybe just at the start of most of our community of practice meetings, is just do a brief recap from our last session. So if you missed that and you're curious about what we covered, like a 1-2 minute recap. And so this is for you. At our last session, we had a really interactive conversation. Again, because our transfer COP just started off this year in I think it was maybe March. We had some interactive polling on Mentimeter to ask folks what kind of community network they wanted to create and what levels of engagement folks were prepared to both contribute and receive. All right, so just take let me stop the playlist there, but you can feel free to take a moment to review these slides. We asked, how can we create a positive collaborative space for community conversation? We also asked what topics would bring the most value to you and your transfer work, and we had invited folks to rank those options. What Sandra and I are going to do is to take the top 3 options that we landed on and make sure we cover those topics throughout the rest of our time together this year. So if you've been with us since March, you may recall that we did send out a program overview for all of 2025. And we are going to find a way to incorporate these top 3 topics while still addressing the topics we had outlined in our program overview. Here is a great question. We asked, what are some barriers to deeper engagement in the COP? And I hope that's not too small for folks. We'll also send up the slides. But there were some great pieces of feedback. So what Sandra and I are going to commit to doing, folks, is at the end of our 2025 cycle, maybe in our November or December meeting, we will bring back a kind of summary of what we discussed in our time together this year, since it was kind of the inaugural year of our transfer COP. And we'll talk about some different themes we noticed, right? Maybe themes that folks were more interested in, or there was more engagement in, other areas in which folks were less interested in. And then we would love to hear, again, your feedback in a kind of 2025 retrospective, a look back at what we covered this year, and help us to brainstorm what you would like 2026 to look like. So we've kind of garnered a lot of feedback already. We're keeping it up to date in a transfer COP feedback doc, and we'd love to share that with you towards the end of the year as well. You know, you're welcome to let us know if you feel like every month is too frequent. Quarterly meetings are better, you know, an hour and a half quarterly. If you want to focus on one topic for 3 months at a time, right? And then we can really get more deep into topics of interest, so on and so forth. So happy to bring that report back and then be able to address, again, some of these barriers as well. And then our final question we had asked last time was, what level of engagement are you realistically open to in our sessions this year? We gave folks a variety of options, right? So if you are newer to the transfer space, or maybe you've got a lot going on, you're multitasking this day or another day, you're always welcome to join us, listen in, and cheerlead, right? With your colleagues, maybe drop a supportive message in the chat or a supportive emoji. But you can also co-lead sessions, right? And we're happy to work with you to develop sessions around topics you're interested in. You can develop and share a resource, maybe pilot something that a colleague has suggested as well. So I hope that helps to kind of visualize different forms of engagement in this space. We know there are lots of different folks, right? You maybe have been involved in transfer for decades, maybe again, you're brand new. And so we really want this to be your community where you're both giving and receiving, sharing, mentoring, and learning from others. And yeah, so we really appreciate the feedback we received in the Mentimeter. Please know that we are always actively kind of pivoting and thinking about new ways to make sure we stay relevant to you. But without further ado, I did want to share today's agenda. Apparently I haven't gotten the blinking down. I think I have to save it as a PDF first. But today we are welcoming Jessica Fletcher, who is a colleague of mine at the Council on Post-Secondary Education. And Jessica is a wonderful colleague. I think she and I kind of really hit the ground running, found similar interests, but also I think we're both very creative people. We like to brainstorm and ideate and think about possibilities while still being realistic, right? Because we know there are limitations and constraints to our work. But nonetheless, I've really enjoyed kind of soundboarding with Jessica some ideas around improving communications for our transfer students and also for our staff and faculty members, right? Our peers who work in transfer to make sure we get the information we need to support our students to succeed. And yeah, Jessica is the kind of brain behind Futurity. Maybe you can drop in the chat if you've heard of Futurity before. I'm curious, or if this is something you haven't heard of before, then I think you're in for a real treat. Um, Even if you have heard of Futurity before, we're going to tailor our conversation today to Futurity and transfer students. So either way, I hope you'll find this session helpful. All righty. So is this, I think, maybe a good time, Jessica, for you to jump in, and you're welcome to introduce yourself as well. I know we're both newer to CPE. Of course, I still have the title for newer to Kentucky, but I know you've worked, I think, in K-Stats and KDE before. So, you also bring lots of background and knowledge, helping us to connect the dots there. Do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Well, thank you, Stephanie. As she said, I'm Jessica Fletcher. I have been on staff at CPE just since March of this year, but I've got 20 years of experience working in education and communications roles here in the state. Most recently, I was at the Kentucky Center for Statistics. I worked at the Pritchard Committee and the Department of Education, the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, and the Education and Labor Cabinet. So I've really spent a lot of time just learning to better understand Kentucky's education and workforce infrastructures, why education is so important to Kentucky and its long-term workforce goals, and was fortunate enough to begin working with Amanda Ellis on the Futurity project when I was at KY Stats. And as you're going to see, this is a project that data is very closely interwoven. So people understand things like wages related to specific careers, job projections, so they know if the job that they are seeking while they are in higher education is in demand or not. So we're going to go through all of that. But just to get you familiarized with Futurity, and if you're, if you've got your phone in front of you, like I'm sure most of us do, and you haven't seen it, although I did see several people in the chat say they are familiar with the website, just pull up futurity.org and you will see what we are talking about. Stephanie, oh, there we go. I can click. So the website was actually developed in partnership with both CPE, KY Stats, and the Department of Education to have a platform that Kentuckians could use to visualize their paths from classroom to career. Now, in the many years I've spent working in education communications, the majority of the websites that we work on at the state level, at least, have been very educator and practitioner facing. Futurity was designed to kind of upend that status quo and be student facing so that students can use the website whether they are part of a classroom activity or they might be outside and not even have been in a classroom for many years. It is created for anybody at any level to log on. Just at futurity.org, there is no actual account creation. It is 100% free tool with public data information in the background. So the site itself is organized into 3 categories: choose your career path, continue your education, and start your career. And all of those are designed so people can come back to the website wherever they are in the process of finding their own futures. So the website is Like I said, the data is sourced from KY Stats, and it includes things like occupational wage data, employment projections and demand, post-secondary cost, and major program cost. Those last two were actually part of, or the Kentucky General Assembly had a piece of legislation back in 2020 that required a public website to help people better understand the cost of college going, how much loans they might expect to take out before they graduated, what graduation rates are at our colleges and universities. And at KY Stats, we built a dashboard for people to do that, but people weren't going to it. It only included public universities. And so as we were building Future Finder, we wanted it to be a more robust experience so that people could sort of institutionalize what looking at post-secondary outcomes data like this looks like. And so that's one of the reasons that Future Finder became kind of what it is because of that legislation. But we also realize that there's so much data that students could be benefiting from, including career and technical education pathway alignment. So when you're still in high school and you have opportunities to learn about careers in high school, how does that look? What is offered at your high school? All of that can be found in Future Finder. You can also find information about if you are a military service member and you are about to retire and enter the civilian workforce, you can also find out which occupations align with the kind of work that you did while enlisted in the military. So it's a very robust and one-of-a-kind system. You can do all of these things with different reports, but you're going to be visiting lots of different websites in order to find all of the information that you can find in one spot under Futurity. So I have a short video I'm going to play, assuming that the video or the sound works. So,
are you a first-time job seeker
Can you hear that?
looking to find a new job? Or perhaps you're wanting a fresh start and a new career altogether. What can Futurity do for you? Let's find out. You'll see here that we're on the futurity.org homepage. Let's check out our options across the navigation bar on the top of the page here. Future Finder. Choose your career path. Continue your education. Start your career and resources. First up is the Kentucky-specific Future Finder, which allows you to explore more than 700 job options, check wages, and see which jobs are in demand. With Future Finder, you can find out how much you can expect to make in the career fields you're interested in, and even do things like see what, if any, additional education you may need to be hired for positions in those fields. You are also able to do side-to-side views of careers, which allow you to compare job demand in Kentucky, salaries, and minimum required education. Next, let's check out Choose Your Career Path. If you're someone who is entering the workforce for the first time or after a long period of not working, or if you're seeking a new career path, this is a great place to visit. Here, you may take career quizzes, which provide the opportunity for you to dig into your likes, skills, interests, and passions to help determine what career paths may be best for you. We recommend that you then scroll down the page and click on I'm an Adult, which will connect you with information and resources specifically curated for you. Here, you may do everything from explore high-demand careers, connect to the skills profiler to narrow down career options, learn about the SNAP Employment and Training Program, and find out what options you have if you earned college credit years ago, you have more than 60 college credits, and/or you have served in the military. Our next visit is to continue your education. From here, you may explore Kentucky's colleges and majors, which you may find useful for yourself or for a student in your life. Once again, you'll want to scroll down and click on I'm an Adult. From this page, you may explore continuing your education as an adult. You may connect to resources that help you find out more about returning to the classroom to continue your education, participating in apprenticeships, exploring education and training options if you're currently a job seeker, and earning your GED. Now, let's check out Start Your Career. The content you may access from this page is designed to help you understand the Kentucky job market and which jobs are in high demand in your region. You'll scroll down and click on I'm an adult. From this page, you may search jobs that are currently open, explore employment training opportunities, learn about opportunities available for formerly incarcerated Kentuckians and those who are in recovery from substance abuse. Find out about training for individuals with disabilities, and dig into career pathway, apprentice-style, manufacturing educational programs available through Kentucky Fame. Finally, let's take a quick stroll through the resources page, where you will find resources helpful for school and college and career counselors, as well as links to resources for working families, resources for new Kentuckians and educational benefits, and resources for current and former foster youth and adopted Kentuckians. Thank you for watching this video. We hope you'll enjoy and get a lot out of exploring all of Futurity's resources and opportunities, and that you'll spread the word about futurity.org, where Kentuckians find their future.
There we go. Okay, I was waiting. I was afraid the video was going to start playing if I started to talk again. So, all of that being said, first off, before I kind of dive into the transfer information on the site, I do want to pause and see if anybody has any questions about the site overall. Okay, well, we have tried to make the website as inclusive of every type of student out there, and that includes transfer students or potential transfer students. So you will be able to find on the site information about how to transfer college credits, the different kinds of transfer that there are. And then you can also learn about reverse transfer and after enrollment transfer. So all of that you can find if you scan that QR code or go to the link that is on the screen. And we really kind of built this just around the premise that, you know, students, especially a high school student who is just getting started, they might have taken a few dual credit classes and they want those credits to come with them. We just kind of wanted to create a place where all of that information was stored in a way that students can better understand it. So, trying to remember what other, Stephanie, is there another slide after this? It's not clicking for me. Yeah. So we also wanted to inform people about how to get their transcripts. So we have linked to things like Parchment, the National Student Clearinghouse, how to get your military transcripts or your GED transcripts. So like I said earlier, the site isn't just meant to inform you about the things that are in Futurity. If there are things that people need that aren't necessarily embedded within Futurity, we have linked them to them. So we wanted people to be able to know that they can go to Parchment to get their high school transcripts, that they can go to the National Student Clearinghouse if they are looking to transfer. So lots of different ways for students to kind of understand what that process is. And then on the next slide, we wanted to also mention that people can use the search bar that's at the very top of the screen. And you know, you can type in any keyword, but we wanted to display that you can search for transfer. You will find all those pages that I just showed you. Most likely, if you're not using the search bar and you click on continue your education, that's where you will find the majority of that information stored on the website. But we really just designed it to be an easy way for students to learn what they need to know to both enroll in, transfer, and then kind of matriculate through college to find their best career that is best suited for them. So last slide, I think. Yeah. So as I keep telling people, Futurity is really in its 1.0 stage. We have a lot of developments that we're either already working on or we're planning to work on if funding becomes available. But one of the things that we want to do is create ways for students to either find out what classes that they have taken, or not find out because they already know, but be able to understand kind of what courses they need for their particular programs, for example. So we're working with universities to figure out how that might look, how we can kind of expand our database even more to show course level information. But right now we are really focusing on some quick wins, like creating a scholarship database. We want people to, whatever their major is, be able to type in what their major is, where they're going to school, and easily find out what scholarships are available to them. That is not something that exists in any electronic format in Kentucky, believe it or not. And we are hopefully going to be able to launch that sometime within the next year. But we are also, last week when I presented this to the Kentucky Career Services Group, they were very interested in seeing something that looks like Handshake, but is more attuned to Kentucky specifically. So all of those things are in conversations and in development. So if you have any ideas about how we can make the site bigger and better, would love to hear from you. Somebody, Stephanie wrote, we students may not remember what they took and where, and that's absolutely true. That's why, especially for high school, you can get those high school transcripts through Parchment. So that might also be helpful. But we, like I said, we're just kind of continuing to meet with groups like you all to get a better perspective on what we need to do to make the site more inclusive for all types of students. Tinder for transfers. Yes, that sounds awesome. So do you want to explain what in your head, what does that look like?
Well, that was just kind of our little joke way of saying it, but it's come up in some meetings over and over again because, Phi Theta Kappa had college fish, and that was a good idea, but they, it didn't stick around long enough to really become entrenched. We start something, get halfway into implementation, get impatient, give up on it, and go to the next product, right?
Right.
So, and we were encouraging students to sign up for College Fish by saying, you don't know how badly those four-year colleges want you. It's like the NBA draft of community college transfer talent. And don't underestimate your value. Get into a bidding war. Make sure that financially and transfer credit wise that everything's going to work out the best for you. So talk to a bunch of places. So we need like a market maker, where potential transfer students in their institutions can meet up and interact and negotiate. And so we've called it Tinder for transfer. We even talked about using Handshake for that purpose too. If we can adapt a transfer channel part of it, but it just, I don't know, it just would be a good idea, I think. So
yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense as far as, and this would primarily be for your 2-year students who would want to enroll in a 4-year, and then just based on where, what their major is and what's offered at the 4 years. it would be really interesting to figure out how that looks like on the back end with data so that people could match themselves, but then just send an email to a recruiting officer at that 4-year even could be as simple as that. But you always just have to think through, like, what does that look like from a computer programming standpoint? Like, how do we get there? And things are actually becoming easier, at least in my head, they're easier because of AI. So, depending on what's out there, like the sky is the limit on how we can kind of turn even the data that is within Futurity into more of like a chat GPT chatbot feature. So somebody could just even type in that, I have however many credit hours at BCTC in education, where should I go next? And then the AI chatbot could even say, well, from what you described, you could go to UK, you could go to U of L or Western, and then give you contact information. Like, it could be as simple as that even.
I wanted to just quickly note too, I had added onto the slide some other ideas that I wanted to share with Jessica that were just bubbling up in my head, or things that I've heard from our other meetings together. If you're on the Transfer University team or Transfer Peer team, or just other avenues of conversation in in-person convenings or the summit. I had the pleasure of visiting ECTC yesterday. My colleague Sandra hosted me. It was lovely. And I was speaking to another colleague there. I think her name is Natalie. Is it Fagan, her last name? She works in dual credit, but
Natalie.
she was, sorry?
Taylor,
sorry. She and I were chatting, and as we've talked about in our first COP, right? CPE, the Council on Post-Secondary Education in Kentucky, is a coordinating rather than a governing board. There are different models in different states, which lend to different ways to kind of, or mandate, structure, incentivize or disincentivize. And something that Natalie and I were chatting about yesterday was, she said many states, have one agency that kind of oversees all of higher ed, both from the legislative governing standpoint and policies, programs, but also like with administering financial aid, right? So whereas CPE and KIA are, I guess, different entities in Kentucky. And so I think it's helpful to brainstorm like the possibilities. But one of the things I took away at my visit to ECTC yesterday was a resource from KIA, nice little book. And at the back, they had listed maybe like 10 to 15 different websites where students can go. And one included, a transfer website that is no longer active. There were other sites too. Some were ky.gov, some were .org, some are just .com, third-party sites. So that was something, Jessica, I wanted to share with you too. I think such a tremendous amount of synthesizing has to happen for it to be like a one-stop shop all in one platform. And I know for me, there's constantly like this duality between being really excited about the possibilities, but then feeling really overwhelmed with kind of where we're starting, and this kind of competition, I guess, between, well, which site is the site for students or for practitioners. So I know one of the topics that we wanted to, we don't have to go in a full-blown discussion, but something to just acknowledge is that we know there's also a lot of transfer information on institution-specific websites, and that may well be, right, what's most relevant to you and your students. So I think there's also a question for honest reflection there, is how much is integrated into Futurity, right? And which avenues are we using for which audiences? KCTCS as a system also compiles, right, lots of information and kind of launch points to different websites. So we don't want things to be duplicitous or redundant. And like Jessica said, this is really the early infant years for Futurity. You see some ideas up here, but we're always open to hearing your feedback on what else we can do, how we can prioritize and make it better. There's the flashing again. Jessica, did you have any thoughts on how Futurity can help our colleagues on the call today to be more effective in their work with students?
What, hon?
I would like to point out another kind of thing we are working on for version, let's call it 1.5, is we want to have sort of a different front door than what you see now with the 3 different sections of the site that is more student based on where the students are in their journey. So we're looking at having links for people, whether they are high school students, unenrolled, enrolled and don't have a major, potential transfer students, so that they can more easily find the resources that are tailored for them on the site without having to do a deep dive. So once we get that up and running, I think that will kind of help you as you are working with students, kind of help get them to the right spot on the site. But we are also very open to working with educators at the post-secondary level to come up with other ways that we can be useful. So we're really coming to all of these community of practices to get feedback and input from you on what you would not only like to see on the site, but how you would like to implement it and what we can do to make that implementation easier. So any ideas you all have in that space would be awesome.
All right. I see some notes in the chat there. Any other questions or ideas, initial thoughts?
I was just looking at Corey's comment about having direct links from KCTCS and other 4 years for transfer. We could certainly work on some pages or adding to those pages that I showed you that would have a little bit more of a Kentucky feel to them. So, linking to at least all of the public universities transfer pages, I think would go a long way. So that's definitely something we can work on and come back to you with. And I just looking at these suggestions on the slide here, I would love to hear any best practices as you are working on this, or even success stories of students who used Futurity who might have been like undeclared and not really known, like they were trying to get their gen eds out of the way, didn't really know what they wanted to actually transfer to a 4 year to finish up to do for their careers. So if you ever come across any of those like success stories that a student was really kind of turned on to a career by way of Futurity, would love to have that for both marketing purposes and just to know that it is actually making a difference in the students' lives. So with that, Stephanie, one more question I just saw come in related to dual credit and transfer as well. Yes, we are really working on getting some more Kentucky specific dual credit pages up and running. Since the dual credit scholarship law passed this past legislative session, we did take some of those pages down because it was outdated. So we're working to get those back up ahead of the new school year starting very soon. So stay tuned for that. I will let Stephanie know when those pages do go live so she can share it with you all.
All right. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us today and for sharing a more transfer specific view of Futurity. I know there's so many different platforms that are used in our work with transfer, right? Student information systems, learning management, customer relationship management tools. There's probably, I don't know, a dozen or maybe 2 dozen. And so even as CPE talks about opportunities for additional grant funding, I mean, for me, before I dive into any new project, I always want to get a real good understanding of where we're starting from, right? Whether you call that a landscape analysis or an environmental scan, I guess this is the policy analyst in me, is you don't necessarily always have to reinvent the wheel. And if you are going to, at least know what is working, what is not, and whose voices need to be elevated, both student and staff. And so I've wondered, and anyway, happy to share back if something does go through, like is it worthwhile to conduct something like a technology scan and look at how these pieces of technology talk to each other, right? We talked about KY stats reports, KCTCS sites, 4-year sites. I mean, interlinking is, I think, one of the more basic things you can do. So at least if students only know about one or staff only know about one site, they can kind of go down that rabbit hole. At least it's connected via rabbit hole, but ideally we would like it to be more maneuverable and, self intuitive. So lots of opportunities on the horizon. And yeah, why don't we, and Jessica, you're welcome to stay on if you like. Why don't we pivot a little bit, folks, to kind of the second half of our hour today. We wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about communicating with transfer students, or even communicating with each other, right? There's so much juggling in the world of transfer. I think sometimes it's hard to know whether we're staying up to date with all the information, and then hard to then share that information with students in a way that they can also understand and kind of apply it. I wanted to start with this quote from Dr. Tia Brown McNair, and Tia is the Vice President of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Student Success with the AACU. She was also our closing keynote speaker for the 2025 Student Success Summit. And that was the day that got snowed out, if folks recall, but the session is recorded if you're interested. She talked about transformative leadership and how to be prepared to support and advance student success. She has a quote in a book she co-authored where she talks about student success being a shared responsibility. And this requires intentional communication and collaboration across the institution. So that's kind of the quote I kind of wanted to underscore some of our conversations today. I'm sure you've heard before, you may have said it till you're blue in the face yourself. It's very difficult to work in silos. And I think sometimes it's not that it's insurmountable or unavoidable, but it feels sometimes easier to work in a silo, right? When things are so kind of complex or you're not quite sure. And I think when we're not quite sure, we're also hesitant to share or to ask. So I'm going to invite Sandra momentarily to walk us through some communication kind of general timelines or kind of key milestones through the transfer process. And we can have a group discussion about that. But before we do, I am going to try something we haven't done before and share a Teams whiteboard or Microsoft whiteboard. Okay. Let me know in the chat if you've tried Microsoft Whiteboard before. There was Google Jamboard. I don't know if they've since gotten rid of that. Zoom has their own options too, but it looks like it's on the screen. So what this should allow you to do, folks, is and what I'm asking you to do is to take a look at this communication diagram, right? If you haven't seen this before, it's a way to demonstrate how communications is sometimes more complicated than we might assume. There's a little bit more than meets the eye. This was a kind of concept that I explored further when I enrolled in a project management certificate back home in Toronto. And we spent a lot of time talking about miscommunication as one of the fundamental dysfunctions of a working team. And I would say that that runs true too to our work with students, right? Oftentimes we communicate or we think we did, and we don't quite get the feedback or the action that we were looking for. So just really quick, right? What you see on the left is the sender, the person sharing information. Let's say in this case, it is you as a transfer advisor, coordinator, maybe a people manager. And then the receiver is the person you want to understand your message, right? What we kind of neglect is all the in-between, right? Is the encoding that the sender, maybe uses some jargon, ways in which we embed meaning into our message that doesn't always kind of get decoded and received by the receiver, right? So there are ways in which we're asked to, or when I worked in policy, we were reminded to always write at a 6th grade level. That's not to be demeaning or to say that people can only read at a 6th grade level, but it is often the most accessible and the most direct, right? Versus writing with academic jargon, right? And then you also have to think about whether you have feedback channels in place, right? Robust feedback channels where you can get input on what you can do better. And think about everything in between that also might count as noise, right? So noise can be physical or literal, like the ambulance going by outside or the lawnmower, right? As I'm trying to speak on a Teams call, but it could also be like psychological noise, right? If something's on your mind that day, that's going to impact a student's ability to hear us as well. So without kind of going too much into the weeds, I just want to ask you folks to put a dot. You can put a stamp, I guess, or you can circle on the whiteboard where you think our communications with transfer students kind of where it all goes awry. Do you feel like it's on the sender end? Do you feel like it's on the receiver end? Do you feel like there's a lot of noise that we're not accounting for? Is this something that everybody's able to do or just like a co-host? Oh my goodness. Okay. I see the chat here. It's only available to members of your organization. Okay.
Does
I did
anybody
not.
have the little buttons at the bottom that show the grabber hand, the writer, the text? See those? If not, then okay. So the
Okay.
external can't find it. Okay.
Well, I apologize. Oh, you don't even see the board. That is so awful of me. I'm so sorry. You can take a moment to reflect on it or even put it in the chat or unmute if you like. I will go ahead and share my screen back so you can see that. That was the diagram we were talking about. So really kind of core to communication, team function, team productivity, team well-being, that I think applies nicely to our work with transfer students as well. So imagine you put a red dot there, and you can bring this back to talk to your teams too as you reflect on your communication with transfer students. We will get that fixed. We might just go back on Zoom because I know we had trouble with our breakout rooms last time too. So I apologize for that. Okay, Jessica, you said, I've often heard that the meaning of your communication is the response that you get. Yeah, so in other words, I've also heard the system is perfectly designed to get the response that it gets or something like that. So if you're not getting the response you're looking for, something needs to change, right, with what you're doing. And so there's a moment of self-awareness maybe for that and not doing the same thing and expecting a different result, right? Or always assuming that the issue's on the receiving end, whereas the receiver may always be assuming that the issue is on the sending end. Kind of takes two to tango. And when we can assume kind of the best for the other person or think with a student-centered mindset like we talk about, then it makes that a little bit easier as well. I've been talking for a lot. Sandra, why don't I throw it over to you and you can walk us through, feel free if you want to use some examples from ECTC as well. We were looking at different phases of communications with students depending on their transfer journey and what might be some of the shout outs, calls to action that we most want to get through, but maybe which we also kind of miss from time to time.
Yeah, thank you. So what you'll see, there's a link there, and we can get that for you in the chat. But that is a KCTCS checklist that I then put and made it ECTC specific. What I would ask my four-year counterparts to do that are on this call is to take a look at that and see if we're missing anything that you can think of. But also my KCTCS counterparts have probably seen this in one way, shape, or the other at some point. But as you know, when we're talking about vertical transfer, there's no too early to start discussing transfer. We're even talking about dual credit and transfer, right? So that's what we're trying to get across. And so if you want to go on to the next one, because it's a little more detailed. When we're looking at, the initial stages for the 2-year students to move to the 4 years, here are some questions to consider. I'm not going to read them all out to you, but, you know, are the 2 years, do they have the resources? Do they have what they need to be moving forward? I think futurity, as it gets more robust, I think that can help us, if especially if everything can be in one location and we don't have to go to multiple spots. The other thing that our 4 years can help with is making sure that if you do have a website that lists the information and the steps, or there's a checklist like this or similar, that's helpful, especially if we can print it out, because then we can, send it to students or save it as a PDF to attach to an email or what have you. So kind of keep that in mind too. Okay. So as they get further along in the 2 year, and I will say for I think for our 4 year partners, sometimes we don't have them 2 years anymore. Um, you know, so we're trying to get as much as we can out of the students when we can, and every school at KCTCS has varying levels of support for transfer communication. Um, to my knowledge, there's only 3 colleges that have a specific person that is dedicated to transfer. Everybody else is wearing different hats or multiple hats, etc. So we're trying to incorporate all the things that students need to know. Sometimes they come to us already with 45 credit hours. So now there's all these things that we're trying to squish in with them and get to know them and try to get them on the right path. So what are the types of things we need to be doing and talking about? And again, I used to call that 6th grade communication. This is a little bit of older reference, but students wanted to, they would rather read USA Today than the Wall Street Journal, right? They don't want big flowery language. They want to know what specifically they want to know. But unfortunately, the downside to that is it takes more words to say that. So it makes things longer. And then, okay, go ahead if you don't mind. And then, because I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, because it's our 2 year transfer checklist, but it's important for the 4 years to know what we're saying, because if we're saying something wrong, we need to fix it. But also, if there's something we're missing, we need to make sure we include it. So here are some more steps that students can take. This is as they're getting ready to hopefully transfer to you. As we know, sometimes they don't decide till after they've graduated. Sometimes they've changed their mind like 6 times. So here's some other questions that we can talk about as far as, making sure that students are understanding. A lot of it comes back to the advisor level, and who's saying what, when, and how. So again, there's varying levels of support and training, I guess might be the best word for that, at our different schools. And then 4 years, we haven't left you out. As I mentioned before, do you have a transfer checklist on your website? Is it up to date? Is it a separate process than freshmen? Usually it is. Is there specific things that need to happen? I will say there are some 4 year schools that tend to lock even professionals out of finding basic information. If stuff like this can be unlocked without having to put in student specific information to get that would be incredibly helpful. Because when we're trying to advise a student to attend your college or university, they may not be ready to say, yeah, I want to come. I want people to reach out to me. We're just trying to get them information. So here are some other, Stephanie grabbed these off the internet. So what kind of things can we be doing to help you all as well? So it has to be working together to make it easier for our students. And I think, yeah. Any questions about that? I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. We know that everybody's kind of heard lots of different ways of communicating, and we're all trying to get, word out to students in different ways, text, email. I can't tell you how many students, I can't tell you how many faculty and staff tell me they don't even read the emails when I send them out. So even though I try to make it as, succinct or, put in the subject line exactly what I'm going to tell them so they can search it later kind of thing. So any questions from anybody? Comments, concerns? Right. If not, I will throw it back to you, Stephanie.
Sure, thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I wrote I think you and Amy for the leadership exchange a couple weeks back just a note about communications. I've seen some things at York University back home in Toronto, where they used lots of Gen Z language, right? I don't know if folks are Harry Potter fans, but there's a Gen Z version of Harry Potter. You can look that up. I think they only preview the first page, but it's very funny. Doesn't always align though, right, with institutional values or the tone of which we typically write in a more formal way. So some departments are exploring like getting an Instagram page, a TikTok page. Other times it could be a tool like the Socratic method of questioning or appreciative advising, right? You may have different models, motivational interviewing that folks kind of lean on as they counsel students or try to work productively with their teammates to advance transfer student success. So I would love if folks are interested, just even taking something, and if you want, you can scroll up to that link I shared from the University of Connecticut that talks a little bit about types and examples of Socratic questions, right? Like we could do a little case study amongst ourselves. The next time you meet with a transfer student or even a transfer colleague, right, in one of your meetings, rather than leaning on the typical ways in which we may ask questions, and there are examples of probing questions, assumption questions, clarification questions, or we've all heard of using open-ended questions that tend to lead to more reflection and thoughtful responses than closed-ended questions. The Socratic method kind of gives you different examples of probing questions, assumption questions, questions to alter viewpoints and perspectives. Be a neat exercise to say, hey, between now and our next transfer community of practice, right, try using some of those questions and see if you get any further the next time you meet with a transfer student or colleague. So those are ways we can stay engaged with each other as colleagues. I've asked before when I first come to Kentucky, is there a statewide transfer fair day or a statewide just transfer acknowledgement day? Are there shared timelines or shared communication avenues? Is this a kind of a topic people shy away from because of the perceived or real competition, right? Conversation, and how do these aspects kind of all work together? What can we provide at the state level through CPE or through the community of practice to help you all be more effective, help to save a little bit of your sanity, or help you juggle a little bit better all the things you need to stay aware of as you do your jobs. So I'm going to just do a quick check-in in the chat. We have a message from Christy. Love this checklist. Which one is that? The Socratic method checklist?
She attached it. She
Oh,
attached a
perfect.
checklist.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to share tools. I will open that. Let me see. Oh, is that a KCTCS SharePoint? Well, I don't know if it's an internal, oh, now you're seeing my pigeon. Hold on. I don't know if that's an internal resource or if that's something that can be shared more broadly or if it was based on kind of a publicly available resource, but I cannot see it. But that's great. And if you do have access, folks, you always have, you can always reference the chat in our meeting through Teams. So don't feel like you need to scramble if you want to refer back. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing that, Christy. Let me see what else we have today, folks. I think we just have our next steps, which is pretty similar as we end our meetings. We have an ongoing feedback form. It's not mandatory to complete, but if you like, you can tell us if you found today helpful, not helpful, what you would like to see next. You can connect with our colleague, I guess, also works through our COP networking list. If you'd like to be added to the list, just feel free to let Sandra and I know. We always send out the updated agenda and minutes from all of our meetings, and the transfer network is right up at the top. So you can share your email address. You can share some areas that you're interested in when it comes to transfer. It could be recruitment, advising, so on and so forth. And feel free to reach out to a colleague between our meetings to keep the conversation going. If you'd like to be a campus spotlight, feature something that's working well at your campus or something that you're struggling with, like I said, this is your community. We're here to support you and to give you a space to elevate something that you're really proud of, or something that you'd like to pick your peers' brains about. You're always welcome to reach out to us for that too. So our next session on August 27th, we wanted to focus on the topic of credit transfer and advising, and this is really quite broad. So if you do want to give us some pointers on where you want us to focus, or if there's a subtopic within credit transfer and advising, tools and resources that you want to point us towards, and we're happy to stay on the call and chat with you about that. Or if you have something else you want to talk about. But otherwise, we will send out the recording today, our notes as always. And yeah, we hope you're keeping well, staying cool in the summer. And we hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Sandra, I should get my music back up at the end too. I'll have to have it ready and make sure it's not right before an ad break, right? All right, we've got our fireflies. Jennifer, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Hey, did you have something you wanted to chat with us about?
No. I just wasn't sure if we were wrapping it up or if you were going to say anything before we left. So,
Oh, well, that was very thoughtful of you to stay on. We have a
Okay.
personalized goodbye.
okay.
Thanks,
Okay,
Jennifer.
nice
Good having
meeting
you.
guys. Take care.
All right.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Hey, do you want me to, do you want to hop off and join just to make sure? I think I kicked all the
Yes.
fireflies off, but
I'm still recording, so I can, hold on, let me. Yep. Let me stop my sharing.
oh yeah, I've done a flyer like that.